Donald Trump says Ukraine's President Zelensky has to start accepting things that he's losing the war with Russia. The comments came in an interview where he said Russia is much bigger and stronger and at some point size will win. He also criticised European leaders, saying they're not handling the war well and that he believed presidential elections needed to be held in Ukraine, suggesting without them the country wasn't properly democratic. It all comes after more than a week of diplomatic efforts failed to yield a breakthrough on a US peace plan between Kyiv and Moscow, with fears among European leaders that Mr. Trump might walk away from the conflict, giving up trying to broker a peace deal and withdrawing support from Ukraine. Well, Sarah Smith has our top story tonight from Washington.
Yeah, and here tonight, Donald Trump did suggest he could walk away from the Ukraine peace talks, but suggested he's not ready to do that just yet. And in this interview with Politico magazine, he also was extremely critical of European leaders, who he said were too weak and politically correct to control immigration in their own countries. And he made it very clear he includes the UK on that list of decaying countries.
Hello, everybody.
Donald Trump hit out at most of the European leaders he welcomed to the White House just a few months ago. And he was also critical of President Zelensky, as he gave a candid assessment of the war in Ukraine and who will probably come out on top.
Which country right now is in the stronger negotiating position?
Well, there can be no question about it. It's Russia. It's a much bigger country. You don't have the cards. You're buried there. Your people are dying.
Mr. Trump's position has not changed much in the last 8 months. He still sounds frustrated with the Ukrainian leader, who he says needs to start accepting American proposals as Russia is winning the war.
Because Russia has the upper hand, and they always did. They're much bigger. They're much stronger in that sense. I give Ukraine I give the people of Ukraine and the military of Ukraine tremendous credit for the bravery and for the fighting and all of that. But at some point, size will win generally.
Thank you very much.
President Zelensky was in Italy today meeting the Pope as he's working to rally support around Europe. Responding to Donald Trump's accusation that he's using the war to avoid an election, he said he could hold a new vote and he will soon respond to the latest US peace proposals. President Trump was dismissive of European efforts to try to resolve the war in Ukraine and of how they govern their own countries, claiming that without a change in border policies, some of their nations will not be viable any longer.
But most European nations, they're decaying. They're decaying.
You can imagine some leaders in Europe are a little freaked out by what your posture is, and European.
No, they should be freaked out by what they're doing to their countries. They're destroying their countries.
Well, European Council President.
And they're people I like. Look, they're people I like. I get along with them. You know that. But they can't let this happen. And it gets to a point where you can't really correct it.
Inflammatory rhetoric from President Trump is nothing new. It can be a mistake to just dismiss it as bluster. He may not be very diplomatic, but he is telling us exactly what he thinks. President Zelensky knows he needs to listen carefully to what Donald Trump is saying, and that's why he has already announced that he's going to look at trying to change legislation in Ukraine so that he could hold an election even though the country is currently under martial law because of the war. And he said that he plans to send his response to the latest American peace proposals here in Washington probably as early as tomorrow.
Sarah, thank you. Sarah Smith, our North America editor there in Washington. Well, in Ukraine, a member of the UK Armed Forces has been killed while watching the testing of a new defensive weapon. Johnny Beale is live in Kyiv for us now. Johnny, apparently this wasn't anywhere near the front line.
Yes, the Ministry of Defence in London calling this a tragic accident, not on the front line, not in combat. What they say is it happened while this service member was observing Ukrainian forces test a new defensive capability. I have been told it was watching a test of a drone which had live munitions. I have also been told that a Ukrainian service member was also injured, but that has not yet been confirmed. I would say that testing weapons here, the time is compressed between development and actually going to the front line because a war is going on. So it is inherently more dangerous. Now, this is the first UK service member to die in die in Ukraine, I should say. We know there are a number of UK service personnel here. The MOD won't say exactly how many. They say a small number attached to the embassy and also to supporting Ukraine's armed forces. But I think we're talking about dozens. The next of kin have already been informed. We've heard from both the Defence Secretary, who says this is devastating news, and also the Prime Minister, who's passing on his deepest sympathies to the family. We will expect in the next 24 hours more details and, of course, the release of the name of the individual who died in such tragic circumstances here.
All right, Johnny, thanks for that. Johnny Beale there live in Kyiv. And at the Kremlin, Vladimir Putin has been awarding medals to some of the troops who've been fighting in the war in Ukraine. It was a display of patriotism, but also a moment for ordinary Russians to reflect on the sacrifices being made and whether the conflict is worth it. Here's Steve Rosenberg.
In the Kremlin, Vladimir Putin was marking Heroes of the Fatherland Day. A chance to decorate some of the soldiers who've been fighting in Russia's war on Ukraine. All of us, Mr. Putin said, are united by a sincere love for our country. In this love lies our strength and our victories. Russia hasn't won this war yet, but President Putin is feeling increasingly confident, thanks to recent battlefield successes and the messaging coming out of Washington. This is America's new national security strategy. It doesn't view Russia as a threat. It's more critical of the European Union than of Moscow, accusing the EU of undermining political liberty and of censoring free speech. It's gone down very well with the Kremlin. 45 miles from the Kremlin, in the town of Chekhov, they too were honouring heroes of the fatherland, from across the generations, from different wars. But it's the war in Ukraine that is very much on people's minds.
When I think back to the Kremlin's full-scale invasion of Ukraine, many Russians said to me, you know what, we try not to read about it or watch the news on TV. We just try to get on with our lives. Well, nearly 4 years into this war, pretending it's not happening is less of an option, not only because the economy is suffering, but also because of the huge losses on the battlefield.
Down at the local culture club, there's an exhibition on about the special military operation. The school kids are told, you are the future defenders of the motherland. Russia invaded Ukraine, yet Russians are led to believe they're not aggressors. The beetroot soup here was dried and part of food parcels for the front line. Irina has helped prepare them. We will definitely be victorious, Irina says. Our lads will return home. A peace deal will be on our terms. That's what the Kremlin wants and believes will happen. Hence, no compromise. Steve Rosenberg, BBC News, in the town of Chekhov.